This conference will now be recorded.
Awesome. So hello everyone, and thank you, Roy, for inviting me tonight. I was just saying to the group that was live here that Roy and I are dear friends, and we have also gone to the same training course together and got the same qualifications from the same trainer, which was really exciting. And we've also worked at events together too, and we have the same goal to help people improve their lives and tap into their potential so they can create the life they love. So yes, thanks for having me, Roy. If you'd like to just show the first photo. Awesome. So my name is Rachel. I'm a love and relationship coach. And this is little Rachel here. And I just wanted to begin by telling you my background story. So as a little child, I always struggled with people pleasing and putting myself last. And over the years, because of the lack of boundaries, I would be exhausted from saying yes all the time. I would work at places I absolutely hated. I would have burnout. I would attract toxic relationships, which was also draining and heartbreaking. And I just seemed to get into this spiral of depression and anxiety, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And I just kind of had this belief that life was getting worse and worse and worse. I was this victim where everything bad was happening to me, and I just felt out of control. And as I got older, it actually just got worse. So I started to attract more toxic people in my life, and I just felt like there was no point in living. It just got so bad. I ended up really actually hating myself. So I just had this strong self-loathe for myself because I guess I just didn't value myself to be put into the equation when it came to relationships and life in general. So unfortunately, I went to drinking to help me cope through the anxiety because it was really bad, and that just escalated my depression. So in the end, I had a massive meltdown, and I was actually planning to commit suicide for a year. And one night I just couldn't take it anymore. So I was drinking, I got in my car, and I drove all the way out into the bush. And I was just absolutely crying, thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be it. And as I was driving all the way out, I drove so far, I lost connection on my phone. And there was no houses, there was no street lights. It was just completely dark. It was around maybe 1 a.m. in the morning, and I was driving, 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 driving. And while I was driving, I lost control of the car. So I actually ended up rolling the car and hitting trees as well. So I was stuck upside down. And as I crawled out of the car, I could hear like a massive truck go by. So I was like, I've got to get out so someone can see me. I got out and I literally had one little scratch on my arm, and my car was completely destroyed. And I walked out onto the road, and I just remember it was dead silence, and I could see the moon, this big bright moon, looking down at me, and I just heard this mean voice come through, which was my self-loathing voice, and it was just like, "You idiot! Look what you've done." And for the first time ever, this other voice came in. It was a second voice, and it was just so kind and loving. And it said, "Don't even worry about it. I forgive you. Let it go." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I want to live. I want to live." And while I was standing there in absolute shock, I was just like, it was just like this big wake up call where I was like, I will do anything. I'm so committed to living now. I'll do anything. And the story continues where an actual ex-bikie came to save me at the scene because I couldn't even get onto the police at the time. It was like no service. That's how far I drove out into the bush. And this guy actually took me back to his house, and I was terrified. I was like, this guy is going to kill me. And he turned out to be the most loving, caring person I've met, and we're still friends to this day. And the police came as well, and they were like, you should have died because you didn't have an airbag. And oh no, the airbag didn't go off, and if it went off, you would have been stuck in the car and we wouldn't have been able to find you. And it was just this massive wake up call. And I just started to feel love for myself and the universe. I was like, someone loves me, so maybe I am meant to be here. And from there, even if you want to go to the next pictures, you'll see my car here. This is the first time Roy gets to see my car. I think there was one more. Yeah, so it was like right in the middle of the bush there. And like I said, I only had one little scratch, and I think the scratch was from a twig when I was crawling out of the car. And it was so pitch black that when I walked onto the road, I actually couldn't see my car anymore. That's how dark it was. So amazing, just absolutely amazing. I am forever grateful. It was just like I said, a massive wake up call. And from there, I just decided, you know, I want to live for me. I want to enjoy life. I want to make it about me for a change. And I went on this healing journey. So I went and got a coach, which is also Roy's coach. His name is Matt Catling. And he helped me release all these emotional blockages that I had and belief systems, these limiting belief systems I had around myself and relationships. And within 4 months, my life completely changed. And if you're ready to go to the next slide, Roy, thank you. And you can bring all these up if you like. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so this is my coach here, Matt Catling. And I cannot believe it. Even just looking at these photos, it's insane. Like within like 4 months, my life dramatically changed. He told me to stop drinking. He got me into like a fitness routine. He released all these emotional and limiting beliefs as well. And I just started to absolutely love life. I remember I joined a gym and I would go to the 5 a.m. classes, even though my shift at work would start at 2 p.m. because I just was so excited to get up. It was amazing. So it was definitely a 180. So my relationships also transformed too. I started to attract more positive people, reflecting back this self-love that I started to feel for myself. And my health changed. I quit drinking. And what the exciting thing was, I actually started volunteering around Matt and his company, Your Future Now. And I was just like, I love these guys. Like, they're so positive. I feel so light when I'm around them. And I put on my vision board, I want to work at Your Future Now. I was a little introvert, so I never told Matt that. But I actually put it on my vision board. And then 6 months later, he called me and he said, would you like a job? And I was just like, oh, this is on my vision board. Wow. So it's just amazing, like how everything changed. I started working from inside, like inward, and started releasing all this trauma and focusing on having positive beliefs, surrounding myself with positive people. And yeah, like I said, within a year, my whole life changed. I got my dream job. I became so healthy and so I had a positive image about myself. I love myself so much. And yeah, I started attracting really positive people into my life. And I also started to become aware of the toxic or people with toxic behaviors as well, which is a really good tool too. Awesome. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, Roy. Awesome. So this is my mission. So my niche is to help people pleasers. I've been really working hard to find out why and where and what and all the things around people pleasing and narcissists. And that's what I wanted to share in this presentation today as well. I'll just read out my mission. My mission is to help my clients rewire their nervous system in such a way that they are able to say no without fear of others' reactions, to put themselves first without feeling guilty, and to attract positive, conscious, and loving relationships, because life is relationships. Awesome. Next slide, thanks, Roy. Also, if this is a very triggering story as well, but please, if you ever have any similar thoughts about suicide or anything, please reach out to Lifeline. There's the website and the number there as well, but also on Roy's page, he has all the details as well for other companies that help in that area as well. I would also want to add, if you ever feel like you want to end your life, please call the police on yourself. And that might sound a bit strange, but my psychologist told me that. She said, if you or your friend is about to or says anything about committing suicide, please call the police straight away. Don't worry about everything like what's going to happen after. Your life is way too precious. Your friend's life is way too precious. It's not worth the risk. So please keep that in mind. And that really helped my friend as well, because I ended up doing that once and it saved his life. So please call the police. And if you're having these intrusive thoughts, please have a look at this website, reach out to a friend or even Roy or me, please, because life, like I said, your life is precious. It's so valuable. So we want to take that seriously. Awesome.
And also for those who are joining from overseas, please look into your local organizations.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Roy. Yes, that's right. Awesome. You have that on your site too, don't you, Roy? For all like Singapore and
Predominantly Australian ones, but yes, there are ones overseas, yes.
Great, so I'm just going to quickly do an overview what I'm going to cover tonight. So narcissistic versus people-pleasing behavior. So I just want to make a disclaimer, I am not a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, so I don't want to say that I can diagnose anyone for that. But what I personally do is use these labels as tools. So when I look at like a narcissist, I want to say narcissistic traits or narcissistic behaviors or toxic behaviors. Because when I look at a narcissist, and I'm saying that because I don't want to label someone as a narcissist. I just want to use the tools of the cluster of behaviors they may have and the cluster of behaviors that a person that has people-pleasing traits have. Okay, so we don't want to label anyone. I don't want to label anyone. I just want to use the labels as tools, and it's just much easier to say narcissistic traits or narcissistic behaviors, because also it's on a spectrum, I find as well personally. Awesome. There was something else I was going to say, but it'll come back to me. Emotional regulation. This is huge. This is massive. So I'll get into that as well. Boundaries and values, communication, self-love, and self-image. So these are all the things that have really helped me do that 180. So I'm so excited to share these. These are so amazing. And I've put in a lot of work with myself and my clients to help overcome people pleasing. So that's the main thing I want to concentrate tonight. I will touch base on like narcissists and all that sort of stuff, but I really want to focus on anyone who's struggling with people pleasing behaviors. Awesome. Next slide, please. Amazing. So people-pleasing traits. I'm just going to quickly go through this. I'm sure everyone gets the idea of the people-pleasing and narcissistic traits, but it's also really good just to go over it. So you find it challenging to say no to others when you really want to, and it's kind of like that feeling where someone asks you something and you can feel in your body it's screaming, no, I don't want to do it. But then there's something that comes in and takes over, and it's like, yeah, sure. And yeah, we'll go into that as well. You struggle to set boundaries with others. You find it difficult to receive without giving back. You find yourself going to the extra mile for others out of guilt or obligation, even though it's out of your way. You have a habit of saying sorry often when it's not even your fault. You feel overwhelmed from saying yes and from taking on more than you can handle. Self-sacrifice for others. You attract narcissistic, toxic relationships. Awesome. Next slide, please. Thanks, Roy. And narcissistic traits. So this is If you're wondering if you have a relationship with someone that may have narcissistic traits, these are a few that I've found personally. So the conversational topic is always all directed back to them. So they're the main like subjects, all about them. You feel like you have to downplay your talents because they feel threatened when things go right for you. So they get triggered if something's going right for you. If you have an accomplishment, they get triggered by that. They might degrade you and say, oh, it's not really that good. And it's just because they have a really fragile ego. They are draining, so they're emotional vampires. You may even feel like energetically drained when you're around them. They use your feelings or weaknesses against you. They are not accountable for their own behavior. They have tantrums when it doesn't go their way, so that's a big one. When setting boundaries, they get triggered. Does setting a boundary mean potentially losing them? So that could be a threat as well. Like even like silent treatment, they use tactics like that too. And it's just to get their needs met as well. It's manipulation. But it's also triggering for a people pleaser as well because of the fear of abandonment. They care more about what you can do for them rather than who you are. So they don't really value you as a person, but more of what you can do for them, almost like a tool, if that makes sense. They exploit you and others. Awesome. And then if you can just press yep. And just one more time. Perfect. If you can leave it there, Roy. Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so this is really interesting. I'm so sorry. The pleasing's meant to be under people. Sorry to make it even more confusing. So yeah, this is really interesting. So yes, they're a person with narcissistic traits and another person with people-pleasing traits can seem complete opposites, but they actually have more in common than we think. They actually have more in common than a person who would have healthy boundaries and healthy self-image. So we're looking at the opposite side. So narcissistic, like overtaker, so they're more taking, and then like the people pleasers overgiver. Narcissists have a strong inflated ego. So when I say strong boundaries, they're like, I want it this way and it's going to happen this way. So they're more dominant, they're more aggressive in that way. They lack empathy as well. They also lack responsibility. So you may find that they use tactics such as projecting and deflecting. So deflecting is like not taking on the blame, it's putting it back on you. And projecting is also making it like, I'm not the bad guy, you're the bad guy. They also use gaslighting as well. So it's just like a deflection to not feel the shame associated with what you may bring up in them conversation-wise, that they may hurt you. They don't want to seem like the bad guy. So they use those types of tactics to push back. And then over with the people pleasing, they lack boundaries. They're more of a victim, but that can also change. Those two roles can change as well. So the person with narcissistic behavior or traits will also go into victim too. It kind of like crosses over. But majority, the people pleaser would be more of a victim mentality. And then they have a deflated ego. So they actually lack a sense of self as well, where more the narcissistic is like grandiose and big, even in a quiet way, because there's also the coverted narcissist as well, which is a bit more quiet, but same deal, same traits. Yeah, and then the people pleasers may have a lot of empathy. So much so they don't really have any boundaries, where they take on other people's emotions and they're not really attuned into their own emotions. A number one feeling that they feel and also get triggered by is guilt as well. They also take on a lot of responsibility, too much responsibility. Like I said before, in the people-pleasing traits, they tend to apologize a lot, even though it's not their fault. And then if you can do the next one, Roy. And this is going to be what connects them. So if you think about it, it's they're the two sides of the same coin. So this is like what they're, how they're similar. Oh yeah, sorry, Roy, next one.
Yes, Rachel. So a couple of questions from the audience. Feel free
Oh
to
yeah.
let us know if you're going to answer them later on in the presentation. The first one is, what if your bosses portray most, if not all, of the traits of a narcissist?
Yeah, that is a tough one. Just a really quick, like a quick answer there. It's always tough with the boss, but when I'm working with my clients, I always look back at their caregivers, because usually if you attract a narcissist that is an authority figure to you, it's usually linked back to your caregivers during childhood. So there could be a link there. And it's really interesting, like I might go a little bit woo-woo here, but we attract people who are similar to our caregivers, especially if they did have narcissistic traits, because the ego is looking to fix or resolve something that's going on there, whether it's like trying to get the boss to love you in some way or anything like that. So it's actually really powerful that you have a boss with narcissistic personality, narcissistic traits, because it means there's something really big you can work on internally, if that makes sense. There is tactics on how to deal with a narcissistic or a boss that has narcissistic traits. However, what I like to concentrate on is the inner world as well, which is really cool because we're actually going to go through that too in this presentation. But that's a really good question. I've definitely experienced that quite a lot, having a narcissistic boss.
And an example of a caregiver would be parents, right?
That's it. Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's right. And it can be either sex as well. Sometimes
Yeah.
as well, I found with clients, it's a reflection of a teacher as well. But there's a lot of opportunity for growth there. But it is challenging. I understand it's really challenging having an authority figure who, has those traits, because you feel almost stuck, like, and powerless. But trust me, you have more power than you think. And this is so powerful. So awesome question. I hope I answered it. I could probably come back to that one actually.
Yeah. The second question is, can you elaborate more on why narcissists can be a victim?
They usually, their sense of self, it's almost like a defense mechanism as well, being the victim. Because if you look in society, the victim is, we're conditioned to believe the victim is the good guy. So it's also a way to avoid shame. So, and they actually do, to some extent, believe they are the victim, because they would tell the lie and convince themselves that they are somehow the victim in a situation. An example could be like if they cheated on you and then you confronted them, and you might react really angry, and then they put it back on you and be like, the way you're acting is making me feel like, it's like the way you're reacting is horrible, and like making you, like gaslighting you as if you're the bad guy. And the problem with people pleasers as well, because we're so triggered by guilt, it can work. The gaslighting can actually work, especially if you were gaslighted a lot throughout childhood as well. So yeah, it's the yeah, a lot of people with narcissistic traits do feel like they're the victim. They actually do believe that as well. And it's yeah, like I said, it's mostly a defense mechanism, but it's also like a core sense of self. And it also could be because they were actually victims in childhood too. They were victims of abuse, whether it was emotional, physical, mentally as well. And then, and also because of trauma, it also affects our development too. So if they were a victim back in childhood and they experienced a traumatic event or just traumatic abuse, whether it was, like I said, emotionally, mentally, or physically, it kind of stunts their growth as well, and they're unable to regulate their emotions. So they kind of do stay in that victim identity as well, if that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. These are really good questions. Oh, and sorry, if we could just quickly go back, Roy. One. There we go. Awesome. Thank you. So the green section here, this is where the similarities are between narcissistic people who have narcissistic traits and then people who have people pleasing traits. So if you look here, the core concept of shame, which is huge. And like I said, the victim mentality could be a coping mechanism against shame because it's just like such a horrible feeling. And also shame is such a strong emotion. It's to do with the identity. So when someone's experiencing shame, they usually have like an inner dialogue that's saying, there's something wrong with me, or I'm a bad person. And the ego really wants to be good. The ego always wants to be safe. And the ego always wants to be like the good guy. And that's why, like, I'm just going to call them narcissists just to make it easier. That's why narcissists would go into the victim mentality, because it will take them out of the feeling of shame. And that's why people pleasers overgive, because they feel shameful if they come across that they're trying to avoid being the narcissist. So that's why they're so extreme to the other side. And then they mostly operate from the survival mode, which is what we're going to go into next. And their sense of self is dependent on others. So it's interesting, they're actually both codependent. They think that mostly like people pleasers are codependent, but they're actually both codependent because narcissists also depend on other people's view of them to really keep that inflated ego in check. And then manipulative strategies. So yeah, narcissists have all those strategies to avoid shame, and then so do people pleasers. And another similar thing that keeps them like together is that they have a belief around lack. So they're deprived of love, and they believe there's not enough love to go around, and that's why narcissists actually overtake. They take because they feel like there's not enough resources out there. And if they don't take, they're not going to have enough to survive. That's their unconscious mind stepping in. And people pleasers have this guilt of being the bad guy, and they believe there is a lack of love out there, so they give to also feed their ego that they're the good guy as well, if that makes sense. And they're both hypervigilant, so they both have a lot of anxiety as well, so they're both quite aware. Even though the narcissist may like lack empathy, they're still quite hyper vigilant, like when it comes to interactions and people being mad at them in particular. Yeah, fear of abandonment. That could be a huge childhood wound as well that they've experienced, and it's kind of like going one way and then one going the other. So if you look at these two personality types or these cluster of traits, they're just strategies to avoid shame, strategy to receive love. These are just strategies. And what we want to do is we want to go into that empowered state where we do have supply to abundance, which is already here. We think that there's not enough, but there is a lot of abundance here. It's just tapping into who you are, releasing all those blockages, and yeah, just all about self-love, really. Awesome. Thanks, Roy. Next one. Awesome. So we're going into emotional regulation. So here's the 4 survival / stress responses. So if you look at fight, controls others, bullies, pronounced sense of entitlement. So this is more the narcissistic traits into fight. And then we have flight, and that's more like anxiety. So you may like notice someone rushing around a lot, perfectionism, over worrying, feelings of panic. And then we have freeze. So that's like more disassociation. So for example, when an animal is getting eaten by another animal, they will disassociate. They will leave their body so they don't feel the pain of being eaten. So these are beautiful survival tactics, especially if your life is threatened. But the problem is that some of us are in it way too long than what we should be. And if you look at fawning, this is all about people pleasing. And like it says, scared to say what they really think, flatters others to avoid conflict, talks about the other instead of themselves, overcarer, self-sacrifices, can't stand up for themselves and say no. So if you think about fawning, it's exactly what it says, people pleasing, but it's an actual survival response for trauma. And if you're a chronic people pleaser, that's an indication that you feel unsafe in relationships. And it's like I mentioned before, it's probably from childhood. It's usually it stems from there. Sometimes it could be like a traumatic event in later years. But yeah, so the main reason why I'm showing you this is that also to say that people with narcissistic traits are also in survival mode, and it's taking up a lot of energy, and it's to show that we're living in fear, and it's to do with relationships and relating to other people. So with the fawning, if you think of like you know, like those little lizards and then they lose their tail, it's actually a fawning response. So when those lizards feel threatened, they actually lose their tail on purpose so that the threat will attack the tail and they have time to run off. And this is to do with people pleasing as well, because people would put this like false self up, this really nice, caring person up front, and they don't show their authentic self. They leave their authentic self in the back, so it's not getting attacked. So it's like at mercy type of response. And our goal is to release that and feel safe within our body, so then we can attract safe relationships as well. So next slide, please, Roy. Okay, so this is all to do with emotional regulation. So I like to say, feel it to heal it. So the goal is to become emotionally literate. We want our emotions to work for us, not us be at the mercy with our emotions. Every emotion has an important message. So this will help you with people pleasing. This is going to be massive. There's a technique I'm going to show in a second as well that will really help with dealing with people pleasing tendencies. So if you think of people pleasing, you like normally get triggered by something, and then you will feel a feeling, and then you may find yourself acting on that feeling, whether it's overgiving or saying yes to people all the time, extra shifts. And what we want to do is, instead of just reacting to that emotion, we want to feel that emotion and use that emotion as a tool. And like I said, every emotion has an important message. So if you look at anger, right? Anger is actually such an amazing emotion. It's such a good emotion to have. So if I look at anger, I would think, okay, it means that there's a boundary that's been crossed. It means there's injustice. It's a signal that something's going on here that I need to look at further. And it was a bit hard at first to feel these feelings, even especially guilt, because I was just like, oh, I hate that feeling of guilt. I rather just overgive and avoid the feeling. But once I started feeling it myself and reflecting on it, I started questioning it too. And I realized that it was toxic guilt. and it wasn't benefiting me. It was really against me. So, and when I felt the guilt, it let go. It moved from my body, and my coach helped me through this as well, and I help my clients through this as well. There's a massive process, like a somatic process, that you go through this. And when you release all this stored emotion in your body, which is probably from childhood, you start to become less triggered of like situations where you might just quickly react to not feel that emotion. So this is really, really powerful. And like I said here too, instead of trying to get rid of the emotion, become friends with the emotion. As uncomfortable as it is, sit and fully feel the emotion and reflect on what the message the emotion is trying to give you. I also said what you resist persists. So if you resist feeling the feeling of guilt and just acting on it so you don't have to feel it, you're going to attract more situations in your life where the guilt will pop up until you're ready to deal with it and feel it. And like I said, once you fully feel it, you heal it. And I believe the next slide is the technique, which is really exciting. Here we go. Yeah, so this has helped me big time. And at first I struggled with it because I didn't like these uncomfortable emotions. And now I love them. I love them because now when like anger comes into my body, I get so excited. I'm like, yes, this means something. I'm going to learn something about myself. I'm going to learn about a boundary. I'm going to improve my life somehow if I reflect on it and feel it. So the first thing to do is to label the emotion. So this might seem quite like straightforward, and that's good as well, but this is life-changing. So what I usually do is when I'm triggered, or what I usually do is like a day, but at the end of the day when I'm by myself, I'll think about a situation that triggered me, because it's really hard to do this in the moment. But I think about like a particular situation where I was triggered, where I was like feeling guilty, whether I was feeling angry. And what I'll do is I'll say, what emotion do I feel right now? Where is it located in my body? So it might be up in my chest, it might be above my stomach, so like my solar plexus. And then what I'll do is I'll put my hand on that area and I'll say to myself, I'm fully present with the emotion of shame right now. I'm fully present with it. And I'll fully feel it. And it's going to be really uncomfortable at first. I'll fully feel it and I'll feel it out, like fully feeling the emotion and sitting with it. And over time, it will release, like within like 5 minutes. And it's amazing. You just feel so free after that. This is really powerful if you have a coach as well to go through this with you. But you can definitely do this by yourself as well. This is a very powerful technique. And what we're doing here is we're not resisting it anymore. Instead, we're facing it and we're feeling it. And the more you do this, the less triggered you will feel when this situation pops up again. And then what you want to do is like which is the next point, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What boundary has been crossed? What need has been unmet? So this is really insightful. And it's really powerful to ask yourself these questions too, because it really gives you insight of who you are, what's your sense of self, like what bothers you, what doesn't, what boundaries do you have, like what boundary was crossed? Was it the way they spoke to you? Was it that they didn't consider you? Was it that they had high expectations of you? Really write down all the things that were coming up. And it's really powerful too, because you'll start to find belief systems. And if you have a coach, I would take those belief systems to your coach to just release them and replace them with more positive ones as well. And then definitely reflect and journal on what comes up. And I always say to my clients, please write it. There's something different that goes on in your brain when you write it down. Information seems to sink in more when you practically do it. So writing is very powerful. And then after that, when you realize what needs weren't met, you'll even find what needs you have, which is really powerful. And then look at how or what new boundaries you can put in place to get those needs met in the future, or to make sure those boundaries are not crossed. And it might seem like, oh, I'm going to write it down, but how am I going to feel empowered enough to do it? The writing is so powerful, and becoming aware of your needs is also so powerful, and becoming aware of your boundaries, even if you don't feel strong enough to set them yet. If you write them down and become so clear about them, you will see them all the time after that, which is so powerful, because like our coach, Royce, my coach says, the problem is 90% solved when you state it well enough. And it will want you to unconsciously stop doing it. You'll start to slowly start setting your boundaries, slowly being turned off, people walking over you, etc. So this is definitely a very powerful technique. I did this for like 30 days in a row, like after each day, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to get to know myself now. This is really exciting. And yeah, and I automatically started setting boundaries, which was so scary in the moment, but I was just like, oh wow, I think because I wrote it down yesterday, I can't break it now. And once you keep going, you just get used to it and more confident with setting boundaries. So please give this a go. I really, really guarantee that this helps. Also, next slide, please. Okay, so boundaries and values. To stop attracting people with narcissistic or toxic traits, you need to define a healthy sense of boundaries and know your values. Your boundaries are defined by your emotions. If you respect and honor your feelings, you will respect and honor your boundaries. Like attracts like. If you respect yourself, then others will respect you. So to stop, like I said, attracting people with narcissistic traits, and more the takers, you know, the ones that just take. The more boundaries you have, or the more clear you are on your boundaries and respect them, the less they will start doing it. They'll go somewhere else. It's really important to define your boundaries. That's the first step. And we just went through emotional literacy. So naming your emotions and reflecting on your emotions and your triggers connected to those emotions, that will help you find your boundaries. Because when you're triggered by guilt or anger, there's a need that's not met behind that trigger, and there's a boundary that's been crossed. So the more you go down that rabbit hole and reflect on your emotions and the triggers connected to those emotions, you will get more clear on your boundaries. The more clear you get on your boundaries, the more you will start respecting your boundaries as well. And like attracts like. When you start respecting yourself and honoring your feelings and your boundaries, so when a feeling comes, I show love to it. So even when I feel guilt, I show love to it. And even when I feel anger, I show love to it as well. It's this new, like, it was, I remember this was really foreign for me when I self-loathed myself and I hated myself, but I challenged myself to be so unconditionally loving, where I was like, I'm feeling angry and I'm lovable. I'm feeling guilty and I'm lovable. And it helped me have a new relationship with my emotions. So I really suggest bringing in those emotions, inviting them in, because they won't stay forever. Once you feel them fully, they won't stay forever. And they're really powerful. When you change that relationship with them, they're so powerful. They have a message each time. And yeah, and it really helps, like I said, with the boundaries too. Also, next slide. Back to boundaries again. When setting boundaries, we want to firstly focus on the internal boundaries, then move towards the external boundaries. So this is what I do with my clients. I focus inwards, because we only have control over ourselves, right? And we are responsible for ourselves. So we're responsible for taking care of ourselves, and we can't really control the external. And when people talk about narcissistic traits, they may say, oh, well, you know, how do I set a boundary with so-and-so? And that's going to take up a lot of your energy, to watch them, react by them, and maybe if I say this and that and that. First, you want to go inward, because when you go inward and you release any like emotions that are easily triggered, you won't have to worry so much about them. You'll even start to notice that you'll feel calm when they're reacting. You'll feel calm when they do an insult. You'll feel more calm, because you'll find that the more you work on your emotions and you're clear on your boundaries, you'll have this strong core sense of self that feels safe no matter what. That's what we're trying to work on. We're trying to work on that core sense of self. And it's so much easier when you focus on that instead of like trying to fix the outside here. You want to kind of be that boat in the storm. So there's like this crazy storm, but the boat is just like so calm and steady and always staying up. That's our aim, to do that. So it's really important to focus on the internal boundaries, and then we work on the external boundaries, like setting a boundary on the outside, because it's kind of going to be really hard to focus trying to set a boundary on the outside if you're not clear on what your boundaries are too. And your internal world reflects the external world. You may have heard this before, but what happens on the inside actually happens on the outside. It's a reflection. It's another woo-woo concept, but yeah, it's quantum physics as well. So there is scientific facts around it, but yeah, whatever is going on the inside is actually reflecting on the outside. So if you think about it, if you find yourself attracting a lot of narcissistic types of people, it could be because you are being a narcissist to yourself. So you're attracting the like, or like attracts like. And it can also be that you swing from one end and they swing on the other, and that kind of balances out when you guys come together too. So it's all about balancing out the inside, the emotions inside, the self-beliefs, and yeah, just working from within. It's really powerful. When you focus on yourself and your internal boundaries, energetically, you may notice that the toxic people in your life will start to fall away, because they will have nothing to grab onto. So this was really interesting in my healing journey. Once I started doing all the inner work and I focused all on myself, my health, I was seeing my coach, I was surrounded by more positive people. It was so strange. All the people who were taking from me just organically dropped away, and I kept going back to my coach and I was like, what is happening? And he's like, it's working, it's good, it's good. I was like, this is so weird. Why is everyone leaving? Like, I mean, it's good. And he's like, don't worry, it's creating space and new people are going to come in. And they did. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And I just started to attract more positive people that were reflecting the new beliefs I had inside and the new dialogue I had with myself as well. So this is huge too. It's really interesting once you start healing and start focusing on yourself. Awesome. Next slide, please, Ray. Yeah, here we go. Values and focus on you. What is important to you when it comes to life and relationships? So these next questions are so powerful as well, because you may find if you struggle with people pleasing, your focus is on everyone else. And then we kind of forget who we are. We kind of forget what our goals are. And even if we ask these questions, we're like, I don't know. I just know what I don't like. I don't like, people taking advantage of me. I don't like this. I don't like that. So what we want to do is we want to focus on the positive. And we really want to get clear on what we want. And once we get clear on that, we will start attracting that organically as well. We can also work towards that instead of trying to be in a defense mode, like I don't want anything bad to happen, so I'm going to fawn to feel safe. What we want to do is we want to focus on what we do want and then work backwards from there as well. And this is a really fun activity too. So what is important to you when it comes to life and relationships? What's your ideal relationship look like, feel like? This is so important. So if you write all the details for that, including feeling is huge, especially with manifesting too. Make a list on what your needs and wants are in a relationship. So it's really important to get clear on what your needs and your wants are. Like, do you want deep, meaningful conversations? Do you want to have fun? Do you want to have someone that you can rely on, that if you call them, you can trust that they will come and pick you up? Do you want to have someone that's emotionally regulated and emotionally intelligent, someone that's into self-development? And even if you go, like, if it would help, go back to past relationships and say everything that you were disappointed by or everything that hurt you, then go to the opposite of that. So if someone cheated on you, I want someone to be loyal. I want to like change it to the positive side. But even reflecting on past relationships, as hurtful as it can be, it's just such a massive opportunity for growth. I've looked at all my past relationships and I'm like, wow, the lessons I've got from it are gold. And they really help me. They really help me become clear on what I do want. Yeah, once you're clear on your values, you'll become more clear on your boundaries too. So that's huge. So boundaries are your core. What's important to you? What's important to you in health? What's important to you in relationships? What's important to you in money? So it's that question, what's important to you? So that's huge. That'll give you a direction of where you want to go and what type of people you want to be surrounded by too. Awesome. Next slide, please, Rory. Overview. So just a really quick overview before the last section. So this is what really helped me in my journey. So just what I've mentioned before, become aware when you are in a stress response, i.e. fawn. I identify the emotion when triggered. So you really want to look out when you're feeling unsafe in relationships and how you're reacting when you feel unsafe in those relationships. So like I said, identify the emotion when triggered. This is huge, becoming aware. Feel it to heal it. So you may not be able to do this in the moment. It's very hard if you're at work and you're triggered by your boss, or if you're out in public and you're triggered by your partner, etc. Always keep a note of it and go back home when you're by yourself and reflect on it. So think about the situation and feel it to heal it. Name the emotion and go through that process I was talking before with the emotional literacy. That is huge. And it will help you to be able to respond next time in a more positive way and be more prepared next time if you get triggered again. So feel it to heal it, avoid acting and sit with the emotion instead. So we don't want to keep acting on our emotions. We want to use our emotions as tools that we can reflect on. So try sitting with the emotion instead. Reflect, why do you feel unsafe in this moment? What are you scared of happening? So think about it as well. These are huge on getting like your belief systems as well. And Roy and I work on this. We rewire our clients' belief systems so that they empower them, so they benefit them. So this is massive as well. If you become aware of the limiting beliefs, then this will help you transform and become more empowered as well. If you take it to a coach or if you release them yourself, either way, like it's huge. So for example, you may have been triggered and you may have felt fear, and it was because you may have upset your partner by setting a boundary. Like, what were you scared that would happen if you did set the boundary, if you did do it? And it could be, oh, well, he will leave me. So there's a belief system there, right? So if I set a boundary with my partner, he will leave me. So it's kind of like I would rather give up myself than the relationship. And then it's something really interesting to work through with that. So definitely go through all the belief systems. You can pick them up, like why would it be so bad if you put yourself first? Why would it be so bad to say no to your friend that you don't want to go out? What's so bad that's going to happen? And really look at that. And the powerful thing is as well, which I'll probably go into the other slide, it's important to, when you actually do set the boundary, to see the other person's reaction, because that will also tell a lot too. And quickly, what boundary has been crossed? What need has been unmet? What boundary needs to be put in place? There's a lot of repetition in this presentation, but I swear to God, the unmet needs, the boundaries, the values are huge. They're life-changing once you become clear on all these things. Also, next slide. Communication, awesome. So this is huge. This is when you feel empowered to set a boundary. which is absolutely terrifying, but so rewarding, so rewarding. It's just like, oh my gosh, you feel alive. You feel so much better afterwards, I swear. Awesome. So focus on your inner dialogue. What belief systems are coming up? So this is really important as well. We want to check in with what's going on with our inner thoughts. It's really interesting. Our inner thoughts carry a vibration as well, and there's usually emotions connected to those inner thoughts. So it's really powerful to look and see what we're saying to ourselves each day. Is it beneficial? Is it self-critical? And this really helps, like becoming aware of our inner dialogue really helps us with connecting with others and ourselves too. So that's huge. Intimacy. So when we want to communicate and set boundaries, we want to create a safe space for vulnerability, which is, it can be really hard because we may feel unsafe ourselves, or a person with people-pleasing traits feels unsafe themselves. So we want to try and set up a safe space for vulnerability, for communication as well. So a really good tip when you're setting a boundary with someone is that, you know, you want to acknowledge, like, this is a safe space, I have something important to speak to you about. They may want to go first, especially if they're a bit of a taker and it's a bit about me. What I would suggest is to acknowledge you heard what the other person said and you say it back to them. This is huge. When you say something back to someone after they tell you something, especially if they're distressed, they feel heard, and that's a part of intimacy. And it can really put someone's guard down. They can kind of feel like, oh, okay, you kind of get me, you get what I'm saying, I don't have to be on the defense. And it's just a lovely way to connect with others too. Then there's the shit sandwich technique. So, oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, sorry, right? The love stuff, love sandwich technique. So this is really powerful. I believe Rory teaches this too. So when you need to say something that may be uncomfortable or set a boundary, or even just let someone else know that you're hurt from an action they've done or they've crossed a boundary, what you want to do is do it in this sequence. So you will start with a loving compliment or something loving about them, like, I really love our friendship, I really appreciate you and this connection we have. In saying that, then you come in with the stuff and the truth. The other day when you said this to me, I felt really upset, I didn't appreciate it, and then you finish it with love. So you say something nice back. I would really love to be honest with you because I cherish this friendship, and I feel like if I'm honest with you, it will deepen our connection. So doing it in that order really helps. It helps people to take in that information without being defensive as well. So please give that a go. When setting a boundary, avoid saying, you made me feel like this, you crossed my boundary. So instead, what we want to do is to take full responsibility for our feelings. And it might be really triggering even hearing that. Like, even at first when I heard that, I was like, nah, but they did it. If they didn't do that, I wouldn't feel like that. But the thing is, when you speak your truth and you take full responsibility, because we are responsible for our emotions, subconsciously the other person puts their defense down. So if you say, I feel really upset by this, and when you did this, I felt like this, and I felt like this, it lowers their defense. And I'm not saying it every single time, but if you're talking to another healthy person that is emotionally regulated and has healthy boundaries and is really good with intimacy and has a lot of empathy, they will respond very positively to this as well. So remember to say, I feel like this when this happened, or from this situation. And you might have heard it before, it's kind of like taking the two people out of the problem, and the problem is separate to the people, and they're working together to resolve the problem. If that makes sense. Also, state the boundary that was crossed and and what you need and what in the relationship. Listen out for what the other person's needs and wants are. So when you're speaking your truth and setting a boundary, be clear on what you need. It might be like, I just need to know that you'll be reliable, or I just need to know that you'll support me. I need you to tell me you love me. And all these needs are beautiful and all these needs are great. And when you say that to a person, like, oh, like, you know, I need reassurance, or I need this and I need that. And when you give that to me, I feel amazing. That usually makes the other person feel really good to get that need met for you. Yeah, so that's a really strong communication tool. Don't forget about mentioning what boundary was crossed and what need is linked to it that you would really like to be met, and how they could meet that need for you as well. So that's huge too. Expect a negative response. So this is huge, especially if you're dealing with someone who has narcissistic traits. Expect a really negative response. And when you prepare yourself for this, it will make it easier to not get triggered, if that makes sense. Because that's mostly what our fear is around, the response. Like, they're going to get mad, or they're going to leave, or they're going to shame me, they're going to get people against me, or I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get dumped. You know, expect the negative response, whatever boundary you're going to put in place, when you feel empowered to do that as well. It will really prepare you. I said here too, remember, people's behaviors are a reflection of themselves. We take on so much by what other people's reactions are. We need to get really strong sense of, like, a core sense of self, where that doesn't matter. That's they're a reflection of them. That's them. They're separate to us. And in saying that, if they do respond negatively, that is also a big indication that you guys are not compatible, which is completely fine. When two couples are, or when people, friends, anyone, when they're compatible, that's when everyone's needs are getting met in the relationship, whatever relationship it is. And it's more like a win-win-win situation. And that, I know that sounds like a unicorn relationship, but it's actually very, very, very possible. So this is a big indication that you are not compatible, because a relationship with compatibility and honesty and integrity and love, unconditional love, is when someone is free to drop and free to be able to express their boundaries, and the other person can listen and take in and have intimacy and understand where you're coming from as well. So I find a big indication that someone is not meant to be in my life is when I set a boundary and they have a massive tantrum, and then they start, you know, saying like, oh, how could you, blah, 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 like, do this to me, or etc. I'm like, oh, this is not good, because relationships should be all about having the relationship and being able to have yourself in the relationship. And what I mean by that is, for example, I had a friend who got really upset once I started to break free from these people-pleasing tendencies. She really didn't like it. And it was only because she was getting her needs met when I was a people-pleaser. You know, I'd pay stuff for her, I would drive her everywhere, I would pick her up, I would listen to her problems, and I was always there for her, and it was always about her. And because she got so used to that, when I started saying, no, I'm not going to pick you up here, or no, I'm not going to pay for this time, she would have a massive tantrum, and it was just her way of manipulating, trying to get her needs met, which was for me to do it for her. But then it was just a big indication. I was like, well, if you can't stay around and respect my boundaries, where I can be in the relationship as well, where I'm also in the equation, then we're not compatible. It's not going to work. But that organically faded off anyway, because she had nothing left to grab onto. So it's really interesting. And, you know, you send love as well, because, you know, they're two different sides to the same coin. So If someone is displaying a lot of narcissistic traits, just remember they are deprived of love and they're struggling internally. Doesn't mean that you have to put up with it. You can send them love from afar. You don't have to put up with it in that way. So yeah, back to the expected negative response. Expected negative response, but also reflect on that as well. And when I started setting boundaries too, I actually got positive responses and I was shocked. I was like, oh, you're honoring my boundary. This is great. So just expect it either side when you do start setting boundaries. The more exposure you get with telling the truth, and more confident you'll get. So the more you'll do it, the more confident and natural it becomes. It's always terrifying the first time, but once you start doing it and you start to get a strong sense of core that it's okay that others react to it, life is amazing after that. You know, I allow other people to be angry. I allow myself to be angry, and I allow others to be angry. So for example, my friend got really upset when I set a boundary. I was like, yeah, you're allowed to be angry. Everyone's emotions are valid. Doesn't mean I have to give in and do what you like, but I do respect that you're angry, that you're no longer getting that need met. Does that make sense? Awesome. Next slide. Thank you. So self-love and self-image, this is huge. Especially for me, like I said, I used to hate myself. I hated myself. I was like, oh, can't stop these people-pleasing like tendencies, and I just hated being me. And then it just flipped. And I practice saying this question that I have at the end as well. But self-love is when you can trust that you will capitalize your best interests. So, and you know, people get confused with self-love and selfishness, but self-love is beautiful. And some people say, oh, you need a healthy dose of narcissism. And I don't find self-love anything to do with narcissism. Like, I find it very, very necessary. It's very beautiful emotion. It's a very beautiful relationship you have with yourself. And it's where you can trust. You have this self-trust that you will do what's best for you, and you'll capitalize on your best interests, what's best for you. You'll get your needs met. You will honor your desires. You will honor what you want in relationships, in life, in health, wealth, any area. But it's that beautiful relationship where you build that trust, that you know that you'll be your best friend. Your you know, even like your mom or your dad, you'll internalize this loving figure within yourself. So yeah, that's mostly what it is. It's that unconditional loving feeling you have towards yourself, and that trust. And like I said, a really good way to help love yourself is to say, I'm lovable at the end of something that you're struggling with. So for example, I used to beat myself up when I made mistakes. So I would say, I'm lovable even when I make mistakes. So I made a mistake and I'm lovable. And it kind of neutralizes it. So instead of having that self-loathing feeling along with like making a mistake, I swing the other way and then I neutralize it. So I'm like, even though I make a mistake, I love myself, and it kind of like neutralizes it, and it becomes, I'm less triggered when I make a mistake, if that makes sense. So when I feel angry, I'm still lovable. When I feel guilty, I'm still lovable. So that's really a life-changing tactic that I use on myself. So I highly recommend. It is beneficial for everyone involved if you fill your own cup and put yourself first, because you'll be giving from a space of abundance, not lack. So if you do struggle with people pleasing, you may feel like that you are almost like the rescuer. You almost have to like make sure everyone gets it first before you. It's actually beneficial for everyone if you put yourself first and you really feel that cup. And it's going to feel really unnatural at first, but you will see that when you start filling your own cup, you'll be giving naturally all this love and extra energy to give. But when you're giving from lack, so if you're exhausted and you're saying yes and you're in the fawning response and you're just giving, you're actually giving from a lower vibration, which is, it's not really giving at all. It's enabling others If they are takers, it's enabling you from giving from a lower vibration. But if you give to yourself and fill that cup, you will be able to give from a space of high vibration and abundance. And it's such a beautiful space to give. It's even to like think about, like, for example, like I was like, oh, I want to give to charities. But the best thing to do is to give to yourself, get into a stable position where you have plenty for yourself and you feel like you're thriving. Then you give from there. And from that space, you can give even more because you'll have so much for yourself and you'll be at a stage where you can make more for yourself and then give more out there. Where if you're struggling and you're starting to give away, it's draining, and that's where resentment builds up. That's where you start losing yourself, and it's not worth it. You've got to give to yourself to be able to give fully to others. And also receive as well, fully receive. That's a huge one too. People pleasers struggle with pleasing. An affirmation I use on myself is when someone gives me something now, I say thank you, and then in my head I say I deserve it, right? Because receiving is just as good as giving. So you might as well appreciate both ways. This is a really powerful question too. Ask yourself, what would someone who loves themselves do? This puts you back into the equation, especially in relationships with people with narcissistic personality types. You really want to focus in and go back to you and say, what would someone who loves themselves do in this situation? And that's a really powerful question to ask as well. That will help you really start putting yourself first. And yes, next slide, please, Roy. Woohoo, we're done. Thank you. And there's one more slide. Thanks, Roy. Woo! So Peter applauding me then. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, what a pleasure. This has been so much fun. And thank you guys for having me. I've actually never done a presentation before, so you may have noticed a bit of my nerves there, but I had so much fun in doing this. Thank you, Roy.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions as well, I'm so happy to answer if we have time.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Rachel. Thank you for that. Some big eye openers for me. Yeah, that was really helpful. A lot of eye openers, and I'm thinking, oh, I accepted all of this for so long, and I've been doing this, and so, but I shall forgive myself. Yeah, some very powerful stuff. The needs met, the takers. I'm just interested. The takers, the narcissistic takers, or rather the ones with narcissistic tendencies. So what needs are they getting met by doing all the taking?
So I find, and thank you so much, Peter. That was such lovely feedback. Thank you. And that was strong too. Like, forgive yourself. That's huge. That's such a loving gesture to give to yourself. I love that. That's awesome. But yeah, with narcissists, yeah. So they're like a bottomless pit, if I could say, to like describe them. So even like a bucket with no bottom. So their core concept is of shame and also deprived of love. So they feel as though there's never enough, and they've got to like try and fill this endless void. So their needs is to pretty much feed that void.
Okay.
And it could be like, yeah, like a core of loneliness. And they get it from like just a temporary like gratification. So they may get it from like someone giving them a compliment or having power over someone, but it's usually not a sustainable need being met. It's kind of just like a quick fix, if that makes sense. Yes, and they struggle to go through healing as well. It's not impossible, but it's really hard for them. because it's confronting that trauma they've gone through, and it's all about facing those uncomfortable, but yeah, their needs are more like ego driven, if that makes sense. So gratification, control, you know, feeling more superior than others. Yeah, you kind of have a lot of compassion for people who struggle with that strategy, because it's just like I said, like a bucket with no bottom. It's just like never ending. You just got to keep going and going and going and going to try and feel it and try and make that good feeling last.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that.
Oh, sorry.
And thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much for such an informative presentation. I've learned a lot from it. If anyone has challenges in love or relationships, I highly recommend you contact Rachel. Her email address is on the screen, and you can see her Facebook, Insta, and website. Book in a session with her, mention my name, and yes, definitely, you know, Rachel not only has a lot to teach, she has so many powerful techniques at her disposal to help you. And if you like a recording of this session, feel free to contact Rachel or myself. I'll be posting it on my Facebook group, and I'll be sending the link to Rachel so that she can share it on hers.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.